our weekly segment with David Helman of DallasCowboys.com.
Rodgers, risky throw, picked off by Patrick Surtain, and they will cross the 35-point threshold with a defensive score.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Ben Erlinson, who'll navigate you through today's financial climate. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go. David Helman, DallasCowboys.com. Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak with us. And David Helman, here we are a couple of days from the NFL draft. Here is the deal. By the way, the Cowboys have the 10th pick overall in the draft. Jerry, Stephen, and Mike McCarthy, they were all over the place today in the press conference on many things along with Sean Lee. David, anything in particular of everything that was said that made a difference to you or kind of caught your attention?
At the risk of sounding cynical, not really. I think these pre-draft press conferences are pretty uniform, and you know, they love to get up there and tell you that they feel good about who they could pick at 10. They're not afraid to trade up, and they might trade down. So they kind of covered everything, and we'll just have to wait and see what they're actually saying, because you know they're going to try their best not to give it away 2 days ahead of time.
Do you see a reasonable trade-up scenario with them?
No, not really. And to Jerry Jones's credit, I just said, you know, they love not to tell the truth. But, you know, Jerry kind of alluded to that. He said, look, if you're going up in the top 10, it's probably for a quarterback, and we don't need a quarterback. And he was specifically asked about Kyle Pitts, who, you know, everybody is talking about this guy, and for good reasons. But I'm just not convinced it makes sense for a team with such a loaded offense to be giving away assets to move up for another offensive skill player. And I think the Cowboys agree. So really hard to imagine that happening, considering that it's a good bet that a lot of the defensive talent in this draft is probably going to fall to them, you know, closer to 10.
David, have you bought your LSU women's basketball season tickets yet?
I have not. I don't really know if that's a great investment for me, because my job kind of keeps me in Dallas. But I mean, you know, it took Kim Mulkey all of about a minute and a half to kind of catch people's attention at her press conference. So I am excited that she's there, but I don't know if it's a smart investment for me to be buying season tickets.
David Helman with us on
Makes a good point. I mean, Dallas and Baton Rouge are really far away.
Yeah, you're right. David, the number 10 pick in the draft, and you've kind of discussed this as well, there's a chance, and it appears almost likely, that the best defensive player in the draft will be available to them. We've mentioned Pitts or whoever else. If an offensive lineman is available at that, is there anything that would keep them from taking a defensive player? Is it other than Pitts at Florida?
I think Pitts is the big one. I think, and that, you know, nobody expects him to be there. He could go as quickly as 4th overall or anywhere in between. And I think he's such a dynamic value that you have to consider it. I would probably maybe throw Penei Sewell, the Oregon offensive. Most people see him as the clear-cut best tackle, and obviously that's something the Cowboys could use as an insurance policy. You know, there's some really great receivers in this class, and, you know, I think they should at least be open to it, but I don't think they would do that. And I get it. It makes sense from a roster building perspective. You know, I would consider it a pretty big upset if it's not a defensive player. If they trade back, I think that changes the conversation a good bit. But if they hang in there and pick at 10, I really would expect it to be a defensive player.
David, do you expect that 8, 9, 10 region to be kind of a, the kind of dealer's choice of, you know, which of those teams may deal back, because none of them really particularly need quarterbacks? I mean, I guess you could make an argument for the Broncos, but there are teams behind them that could be motivated to get there at that point.
Well, I don't think you can rule out the Panthers. I know they traded for Sam Darnold, but you know, it's not like Sam Darnold is this proven commodity that you have to build around. And they've got trade assets, and, you know, in terms of still having Teddy Bridgewater kicking around. And it, you know, all of the smoke coming out of Carolina this offseason has been that their new owner is just desperate to have a face of the franchise quarterback. So, if the situation presented itself, I don't think you can write that off. But Carolina honestly scares me if I'm a Cowboys fan for a variety of reasons. It seems like their needs really line up a lot with what the Cowboys want. They need offensive line help so they could take one of those offensive tackles off the board. Their cornerback depth chart is really not great either. So, we love to say that the Cowboys are going to have their choice between J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain. I'm not convinced that's true. I think somebody like a Carolina could maybe take him at 8. So that's really where it gets scary for me. Like, picks 1 through 6, I feel like everybody's got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen there. But 7, 8, 9, and yeah, you mentioned somebody could trade up into that spot if they feel strongly about a guy. Those 3 picks before the Cowboys come up, 7, 8, 9, kind of worry me if I'm trying to make sure I get my guy.
David, this is non-Cowboys, but what do you think the 49ers do at 3? That seems to be the pick to me where, Trevor Lawrence is pretty much a foregone conclusion. It seems the Jets like Zach Wilson a good deal, but then at 3, is that kind of where you could see the draft taking its first twist?
Man, I kind of hope you're right, and I don't know. I don't want to knock Mac Jones too much. I think he's a good player, and I think he's worthy of being a first-round pick, but I'm not convinced at all that he should be a guy that you trade away future drafts to go up and get number 3 overall ahead of, in my opinion, a much more talented and equally proven player in Justin Fields. And then even a guy like Trey Lance, obviously he's incredibly raw. He's only played 20 games, but if you've ever seen the guy work out, his natural talent is undeniable. I would way rather take a chance on one of those 2 guys. But, all the smoke seems to point towards San Francisco actually wanting to draft Mac Jones. We'll see what happens. I think, the Falcons might be the most interesting team in this entire draft because, you could convince me that they should take a quarterback if Justin Fields is there. Matt Ryan's getting up there. That makes sense. There's word coming out of Atlanta that they might try to trade Julio Jones as the spring goes along. They could draft Kyle Pitts to work with Matt Ryan. They could draft a quarterback. Or they could trade out of that if somebody like a Denver or a Carolina is desperate to get a quarterback, they could trade back and get a haul for it. So when they come up on the clock, that's when I really expect the craziness to really start.
So Sean Lee retired. That's not a surprise, and it could have happened maybe even a couple of years ago. What would you remember most about him?
Oh man, Sean Lee is like, it's funny because he's one of the most intense people I've ever been around, but he's also like very naturally funny. He's a fun guy to talk to, but he's just all business. I think about, obviously he's legendary for how much tape he studies and the way that he anticipates things on the field. But like I said, it's funny. He's all business, but then at the same time, he'll like crack a joke on you and say something really funny or tease you. He used to tease me about Penn State beat LSU in a bowl game when he was a player there, and he gave me grief about it every opportunity that he got. So like all business all the time, but also like one of the secretly very fun personalities on the team. It's Cowboys will miss him on the field, I'm sure, but it'll be a bummer not having him around the facility as well.
David, the one thing I remember, I'll remember about him forever, was in the documentary they did on Amazon, the All or Nothing. They were showing him, and like he had clearly spent and gotten annoyed with the fact that Darren Sproles used to kind of really get after the Cowboys. So he just watched tape of Darren Sproles again and again and was telling everybody, like, listen, this is specifically what he does. This is how you have to tackle Darren Sproles. And how much he worked on just that one player just knocked my socks off.
No, yeah. And there's a famous scene from that show where, season was over and they hadn't made the playoffs and you got 9 months before you have to worry about the season again. And he went straight into the film room and started watching tape. He's addicted to it. And, I can think of a million little things like, he wore this one specific type of cleat that he just loved, and they stopped making them. And he loved them so much that he would like scour the internet, and he had like the equipment staff get on eBay and periodically check for it. The attention to detail that he went through just to make sure that he could wear the type of cleat he preferred. Like I said, he was all business. There was no there was no detail that he would not go over to try to be better at football. And I mean, people say stuff like that all the time, but like, if everybody on your roster cared as much about being good at football as Sean Lee did, you'd win the Super Bowl like every year.
David, what do you think the Cowboys do with the option with Leighton Vander Esch?
I legitimately think it depends on what happens this weekend, to be honest with you. Leighton, he played 18 games as a rookie. He was fantastic. He was an all-pro. He's only played 19 games in the 2 years since. So durability is obviously a very real concern. The $10 million price tag, if you pick up that option, you also probably want to keep Jalen Smith's contract situation in the back of your mind. So I wonder, if you come out of this draft without really addressing linebacker in a big way, it's probably worth it to pick it up and just, ensure yourself for the future. Just make sure you have a starter caliber player. But, let's say you wind up taking Micah Parsons, or doesn't even have to be a number 10 overall pick. Maybe later on in the day they draft Baron Browning out of Ohio State, or Devin Collins out of Tulsa. My LSU guy, Brill Cox, is turning a lot of heads as a day 2 possibility. If they get a guy like that, then maybe they look at the option and say, well, we've got this super talented rookie on a cheap contract. We don't need to give Leighton $1 million. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they haven't made that decision yet. And I think they're waiting to see, who they wind up drafting over these next 2 days.
David, get some sleep if you're getting any, because I know the next 3 to 4 days for you. And then even after that, then you start breaking down who was drafted and all about them, and then the incoming players as well. Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate you coming on a little bit late with us.
No problem. Hey, it's very busy, but it's very fun, so I'll take it. I'll
Absolutely.
talk to y'all later.
David Helman, DallasCowboys.com tomorrow. We'll